There we go. So as mentioned before, there will be recording this available on our YouTube channel. You'll get it in the mailer too when it comes afterwards. And you go to, and all the rest of ours are there, plus some of our lunch and learns like the Ultimate Primer to ROHS and the Ultimate Primer to Reach, where a lot you can learn there for free. YouTube also does a pretty good job of indexing it so you know what all the topics are throughout the sections. So today, it's on the new Canadian Plastics Registry guidance. We've done other webinars and they're on YouTube if you want to watch them. On the Canadian Plastics Registry, it's probably the big upcoming deadline for this year. I'm Bruce Galdrum, the VP of Consulting Services here at Claigan. I'm going to be your host. So why are we doing a webinar so soon? You're like, oh my goodness, last webinar was only 2 weeks ago. Like, give us a break. Only 2 weeks ago. Also not spelling. Probably do this short gap between. So there's new guidance, the guide for reporting the Federal Plastics Registry. So that kind of needed one. And the fact the submission is due in 7 months. So to recap, it's a new guidance, which is what I'm talking about today, and the submission for the Plastics Registry is due in 7 months for the companies in phase 1. Which the average project of any complicated product. So if you make complicated electronics on the consumer side, it takes a while. If you just put a poly bag around some apparel, it doesn't quite take as long, but it still takes longer than you think to amalgamate the data. But the average project, especially in the electronic side, is 6 to 8 months. Clock is ticking, and it's 7 months away. So that's kind of an important thing to know. Like if you haven't started now, you're in a lot of trouble if you have complex products on the consumer side. So I'll talk about phase 1. So we're the only company that has it all together for the Plastics Registry. We've obviously been talking about it for a while now. We've done tons of projects. We have lots of organization. We've done things, different appliances and lamps and refrigerators, which by the way are really complicated things. Lots of different stuff in packaging. This is a typical individual product declaration. There's lots of plastics in it. It's kind of a complicated thing. We have it down pretty well. Also, side note, Canada PFAS, you probably tuned in a number of times us talking about fluoropolymers and PFAS. I'm quoted on PFAS on CBC. It came out today. Today's a busy day. It's on the front page of the CBC News site. It basically goes Elon Musk, the Gaza withdrawal, and me. Sure, I guess Elon's more topical than I am. Funnily enough, we went to school briefly. It actually took me 10 years to realize that Elon was Elon Musk. It's kind of fun. But it's a really neat one. I'm quoted half a dozen times or so in the article on PFAS and clothing. You just go to the CBC and lots of good stuff there. It's one of the advantages here of having consultancy like this talkie thing I'm doing and having a lab. So we can cut through what people keep saying, oh, this has that, and that. No, it doesn't. Or yes, it does. Or really, it's that, because we can actually go test it. And like, oh, that was cool. That was so last year. This year, it's totally different. So some of the studies we've done and in there are saying like a year ago was like this. We had, 90% of children's club had PFAS coatings, and now it's 20%. Funnily enough, I actually go, knowing a lot, having a testing a lot, I actually go looking for the fluoro-coated apparel. It's so much better, and it's not, and the replacement's so much more dangerous. The polyurethane coatings are like, oh, it's polyurethane. How bad can it be? They're isocyanates. It's cyanide-based. It releases a lot more isocyanates and cyanides than the PFAS apparel releases. The little water-soluble PFAS salts. And compared to how much was in makeup, it's nothing. So I actually go looking for like the old Gore-Tex, not the new Gore-Tex expanded polyethylene, old Gore-Tex, EPTFE. You can still get the old Gore-Tex, way better. Guidance summary. So the Canadian Plastics Registry phase 1. Due September 29th, 2025. So that's what we're talking about today. So I got to talk about myself, which is kind of cool, kind of put my name in the same sentence as Elon Musk, which is kind of funny. But back to the Canadian Plastics Registry. Sorry, it's the afternoon. Phase 1 due. So it's due. The phase 1 reporting is due September of this year, based on what you sold last year. So you've already sold everything. Now you have to report on it. Hopefully you've started the work. Here's the hoping. The details, 53 pages in there. It was released the end of last year. I'm first talking about it today. 53 pages of it. And it contains explanation of key terms and reporting timelines and persons obligated to report and what's needed to be reported. Lots of example calculations. There's math in here. For those who like math, there's math. Sell math, but still math. And it's a wonderful FAQ. The FAQs are pretty good, actually. It is complicated. So the original law document, and they had a draft consultation document last year, and the draft consultation document had a lot of mistakes because the law is actually a hard read. It's extremely hard read. It still has some funniness. Like next year, car tires will have to report to the Plastics Registry. However, rubber is not a plastic. I'm not sure what the actual tire people are reporting because the tires are rubbers. They're a different category. They're not plastic. Anywho, that's a problem with the law. But the law has a lot of details. The law is like choose your own adventure. Like if you're in section 2, part 3, then do items of section 5, 3, 5, 7, and 9. The next year do section 6, 8, 10. What? So the guidance is a lot better. We also have an FAQ on our website, the Claigan website. It's a wonderful FAQ which cuts through a lot of this stuff. But the FAQ and details here are better. It's less like, hey, if you're in section 2, do sections 5, 7, and 9. It's complicated stuff like that. Actually says you have to do this. And I say we're talking about phase 1 products, and I'll explain the difference between phase 1 and phase 2 in a moment. We're focused on phase 1. There's a lot of complexity. Let's get to phase 2 next year. So who is responsible? Who's the responsible party? So that's a cat cartoon, Scott Metzger. That's definitely my cat. I was going to shower today, and there's a crashing outside, and this is more or less my cat following this flowchart. The original law has the complexity of this flowchart, especially around responsible party. I'm going to simplify it into a nutshell. The brand owner. The brand owner is responsible for doing it. But what if somebody else imports it? If the brand owner is located in Canada. So no matter who imports it, the brand owner is responsible if they're located in Canada. Like you have a CRA address. When in doubt, you go to Industry Canada, you look up your company. Is it there? Yes, then you do. You're responsible. If you're not, if the brand owner is not located in Canada, it's the importer. Now, some companies go, I'm the brand owner, but somebody else, distributor's bringing my stuff in. Yeah, it's a distributor's problem. They're like, well, we have like 7 distributors and 10 different customers we ship to directly. Cool, they're all responsible. Or you could report for every, well, actually you can't do that. PFAS report for everybody. This one, you can delegate responsibilities. By the way, so the importer is responsible if the brand owner isn't located in Canada. Brand owner is located in Canada, the brand owner is responsible. You can delegate it if both parties agree. Like somebody outside of Canada could decide to report and delegate it to us. It's possible. Or you could delegate if you're in Canada, you're a brand owner, but you have these PRO organizations, there's retake back organizations in different provinces. You can delegate the responsibility to them too. But in absence of any delegation, the brand owner is responsible if located in Canada. If the brand owner is not located in Canada, it's the importer, which includes individual businesses, not individual consumers though. De minimis exemption. So how much do I have to ship in, sell, make for this to be a problem? What is the threshold to have to report? If the combined total of plastic products and plastic packaging. So plastic products are categories of products. Electronics are a plastic product. Apparel are plastic products. If you're bringing over 1 ton, 1,000 kilograms a year of plastic products and packaging combined, and that's not the plastics and electronics, that's the whole electronics, the whole weight. If you have over 1 ton a year that you either manufacture in Canada or import into Canada or sell into Canada, you're in. In the guidance, we send out section 3 on page 9 has lots of different examples. If they want specifics. And by the way, if you have any questions, feel free to submit it in the control panel. Wow, it's swallowed my own spit there. There's a Q&A section. Feel free to submit any questions you have in the control panel. I'll try to get to as many as possible. Canadian Plastics Registry. So 2025 versus 2026. So there's what's in scope. There's 2 different factors for what's in scope. This is factor 1 about 2025. Residential waste, i.e. consumer, it's disposed of by a consumer. It ends up at the blue bin at a house at the end of its life. That's consumer. That for products in scope is 2025. That's phase 1 for certain products. Electronics, product packaging, and some very specific single-use products are phase 1. We have a previous webinars that described a very small number of disposable, like takeout containers and hygiene products that are just single-use disposable. You make a tubing single-use for your medical pump. That's single-use, but it's not in scope of this. A very specific single-use. So electronics and product packaging and some very, very specific single-use products like takeout containers. If at the end of life they'd be disposed of by the consumer at the end of the driveway in that bucket, they're in scope in 2025. So it has to do with which recycling system they end up in. If they end up in the blue bin at the bottom of my driveway, is paid for by the city out of my taxes. Differently, the institutional waste, the big blue bin out back of our work, which does not look like that, is 2026. This is institutional, also called ICI. So that waste is 2026. So imagine you sell apparel and you ship apparel to a consumer. at their house. It's got a plastic bag around it. That's disposed of by consumers. That is 2025 reportable. However, also you send a whole bunch of apparel, shirts, to a store in a shopping mall with this big plastic covering over it. They take the plastic covering off. They hang all the shirts on the racks, and they dispose of the plastics at the shop. That's institutional. That's 2026. Got disposed of by a business who has to pay, or the shopping mall or whatever has to pay for the blue bin. They're two different systems. That's phase two. Funnily enough, it's often the same company that picks them up, but they're paid differently. One's paid by the city, one's paid by the company. So that's phase two. So the guidance is phase one. Phase one is also only certain products. It's 2025 reporting, so it's September this year, 7 months from now, 7 months almost from the day, what you sold in 2025. It's consumer electronics, so it's electronics that can end up at the consumer. So you make multimeters, and you say half is sold in Home Depot, and half is sold on Uline. The Uline stuff ends up with businesses. The Home Depot stuff ends up with consumers. Therefore, I report 50% of my multimeter sales. Even though the multimeter is professionally designed for professionals, we know half our sales goes to consumers. So it's consumer, that half. It includes medical devices. So if you make a pump for a hospital and it works for the patient in the hospital, that's institutional. At the end of life, be disposed of by the hospital. But you make, glucose monitors or diabetes monitors similar for the home, for the user to use. The electronics, any of its packaging, whether it or the disposables packaging, are all in scope. So consumer electronics, including medical devices. So basically, if it's in scope of EU ROHS and it would be disposed of by a consumer, or some percentage of the sales would be disposed of by a consumer, it's reportable this year. Same with consumer packaging. If packaging goes to the house, then it's 2025 reporting. So for example, imagine you sold bottles of Coke and they go to a Quickie Mart, whatever, a corner store, and the corner store takes the plastic bottles out, puts them in the shelving, and the consumers buy the plastic bottles. That plastic bottles the consumer takes home is consumer. However, it often came to the store in a plastic wrap, and that was disposed of by the store. That one's institution. And sometimes you have to make a reasonable percentage difference. So you take a well-known coffee franchise here, or whichever restaurant franchise, whatever you want to call it, Tim Hortons, that they have disposable takeaway plastic, and that not as much as they used to, but some. And some of it goes home. That's drive-through and takeout, and some stays in store. The stuff that goes home, the takeout and drive-through, is consumer disposable. They have to get rid of it. They have to report in 2025. The stuff that's disposed of in store is 2026 in the packaging there. So it's interesting, complicated, because that's the specific single-use plastics that go home are 2025. The ones disposed of in the restaurant are 2026 institution. Also in phase two, so for example, you have professional electronics, including medical devices. That pump used in the hospital is in there. So even though, by the way, you have complicated electronics like that, and it's not due to 2026, the level of complexity of the plastics in that feller dwarfs most of consumer stuff, other than maybe laptops. So yes, you're not until next year, but you better start soon, because it's going to be long and involved. Now, there's some good ways to do it. We use average bill of materials to do fixed factor and a bunch of other stuff. It's really good. Institutional packaging, so the overwrap that goes to the manufacturing, a distributor, that's disposed of by the business, that's 2026. Apparel and textiles, so there's a lot of clothing that's plastics, like polyester and that kind of thing. Some are cellulose, which aren't, but the plastic ones are in. The actual apparel is reportable 2026, irrespective of whether it's institutional or consumer. Perfect. Transportation, cars. That's an exciting one. They really should be studying now. That's not trivial to do, especially different car models they have. And the government has as much sympathy of car people not knowing what's in it. Construction, so your gutters, your insulation, all of that. Fishing and agriculture. So if you walk along the shore here in the Atlantics, and you're like, oh, what's floating up on shore? All the different consumer packaging and the old 6-pack thing, ring. I'm like, no, it's actually mostly fishing line and fishing net. A plastic that floats in. By the way, car tires are in 2026, but car tires are rubber, not plastic. They're not actually reportable. So I didn't put them here because they're not really in. They're in, but they're not. They're in, but they don't have nothing to do. Do you report the Kevlar in, stuff inside them? I don't know. I think there's a bit of a math sciencey problem here. You'll see an example later. There's a few little errors in it. The one is tires are not a plastic coat. They're rubber. Synthetic rubber is not reportable. Kind of silly. Okay, so what has to be reported? Plastic packaging. So this is the packaging people, what you have to report. So it's residential. Sweet. 2026 has institutional, and you report residential separately, institutional. But 2026, you're going to do residential again and institutional separately. You know, never should the two meet. Then you can report, so it's residential, not institutional in 2025. It's going to be how much kilograms of the packaging you made of the packaging in Canada, which most of you don't make packaging, or imported into Canada, or placed on the market, which is sold in Canada, each province and territory. You're like, what do you mean? I have to know sales in each province and territory. Yes. Now there is a caveat. There's a way. There's also a way to do it in a simple way. You're allowed, and I'll talk about it again later, to take your Canadian sales and then apply it to each province based on the population percentage of each location. So Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories, and so what it does is we can, you know, Ontario say 40% of the population of Canada, then you can apply 40% of your sales to Ontario, then 20% to Quebec, etc. And then some fraction of percent to Nunavut, all 12 people there. Well, there's more than 12, but pretty small relatively. For those who don't know, by the way, it covers 2 provinces, but in a 6-hour drive, basically from Hamilton to Montreal on the same road, basically 401, is half the population of Canada right there. The rest is scattered out in a very, very broad amount of space. Resin types. You have to say what. So each resin that's reported separately: low density polyethylene, high density polyethylene, PVC, other thermoplastics like polycarbonate and acetyl actually merge together as other category. I'll show those. So this is the categories. It's not the normal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. The 7 other is quite large. They're all thermoplastics. Thermoplastics can be remolded afterwards. Thermosets, or that's the way it is. Like your epoxy and your circuit board's a thermal set. It's not changing. That's the way it is. There's no remaking that one. There's a lot more categories. This is really exciting if you're using, of course, suppliers around the world. It's a different numbering sets. The NAPCS code on the right, not the normal ASTM 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the left. You're reporting against the North American product commodities, PHCS. Anyway, it's supposed to be North American, but it's Canadian. It's Canadian only. It's supposed to be North American coding system, but it's Canadian. It's StatsCan. So you have to report that. So it's not the usual 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus the other 7. There's a lot of things, and the other is separated about 8 different bins, of which the other category of others, so the other thermoplastic resins is a lot of stuff. It's acetyl, POM. That's like the bindings on your ski boots. That's polycarbonate, which is a variety of things like sand. That's all other thermoplastic resins. So there's a lot of actually plastics in that one. Very exciting. So back to the packaging. So it's usually, this is just your plastic packaging. The resin source, virgin or recycled, almost always virgin. Getting recycled plastics is quite difficult. Category of packaging, filled or unfilled. Subcategory, rigid or flexible. Filled, unfilled means you got the bag. So you mentioned you bring in a whole bunch of bags to, you're selling computers, to put your computer in the packaging. So when you buy the bags, you import the bags, that's unfilled. Once you put the computer in the bag, that's filled. They're reported separately. Filled and unfilled packaging are reported separately. To avoid duplication, but it's a bit of a nuisance. What waste stream, residential or institutional? This year it'll only be residential. The quantity of each resin in packaging manufactured in Canada. So if you made the packaging, not somebody else in Canada, how many kilograms? If you imported the packaging, how many kilograms? And that includes with a product inside it, filled. And the quantity of each packaging for each resin. So you're reporting, by the way, kilograms of low density polyethylene, polypropylene, so on and so forth separately. The high density polyethylene, quantity of each resin in packaging placed in the market, sold in Canada and by province. And the methods used to determine the quantities. We'll explain those later. A specific component method, average bill of materials method, and fixed factor. Basically, the average materials method gives you a fixed factor that you can use. So that was just packaging. Electronics are same thing, it's just a level of complexity different. Because they're basically, again, residential, not institutional. 2025, electronics, only residential. The amount of electronics for residential users you manufacture in Canada, or more commonly imported into Canada, or market in Canada, and how much you've placed on the market, how much you sold in each province and territory. How much in Canada, and then how much in each province and territory. They're like, that's a lot of numbers. So if you know the Canadian numbers, you're allowed to use an average number for each province and territory, a percentage of population. Resin type, that's that huge list again of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different versions of 7, and then a whole bunch of other stuff. Resin source, virgin or recycled, it's almost always virgin. Using recycled plastic is so difficult because the controls. Category of plastic products. So this would be electronics, EEE. Subcategory, we'll say it's lamps, so it's lighting. Waste stream, residential. Quantity of each resin and plastic products manufactured. So that's if you made the electronics here, how much of polycarbonate, how much low density polyethylene, how much polyester, how much other polyester, like PBT, nylon. The quantity of each resin and plastic product imported. So if you're bringing the computers in, each number of kilograms of each plastic in them by category. So if you're doing lamps, like imagine it was IKEA, they have lamps, they have a zillion different lamps. They have to take the plastics in each of the lamps, multiply them against their volumes and their own weights. So the weights per product, their own volumes, then merge all the lamp ones together to get one number for nylon, one number for polyester, etc. I'm not showing an example in a moment. The quantity of each, that's why I feel like, have you guys started yet? I really suggest starting. When we've done a lot of projects now, you want to get started. We're very good at this. This is like a profession for us. We're quite good at it. It's not fast. It's much faster for us than people haven't done it many times, but we have a plan, we have processes and flow charts and a whole way of doing things. Be very efficient. You want to start now. The quantity of each, if you have like, oh, I don't have to report till next year, you want to start now. That complexity of the products you have, there are slightly simplified ways to do it, but you want to start now. And the quantity of each resin and plastic products placed on the market in Canada, that's how much you've sold by province of polypropylene in all of your lighting products. There's a way to put it together, but it's harder than you think. And the methods used to determine quantities. I'll talk about the methods again later. So a lot. So we took an IKEA product because we could just buy it in the corner. It's all, most of the information is public and we just been testing to show it. And so the stuff on the right is the Havers hanging lamp. That's what's on the website. It's actually relatively good detail. And so we actually tested it to see what it is. And there's the PVC. Now, here's one of the bit of a fallacy. A PVC power cord is not PVC, just PVC. The outer section's PVC. The inside section's cross-linked polyethylene, which will come up later. And it's a plastic. There's the PVC. The POM, the hanger, which is acetyl plastic, otherwise called POM, polyoxymethylene or whichever it is, and then polycarbonate are both thermoplastic resins that are in the other category. So the acetyl and the polycarbonate both add up to that 60 grams. The polyester PET shade ring is right there. However, the ring holder is PBT, polybutyl terephthalate. It is not a polyethylene polyester. It's a butyl. It's a different one. By the way, half your connectors in your circuit board are PBT. That's maybe a third to half your connectors on a circuit board of that category right there. The internal cables of PVC are cross-linked polyethylene, normally in North America. That's not PVC. That's polyethylene. But it's not low-density polyethylene. It's not high-density polyethylene. It's cross-linked polyethylene. So there, that goes in that category. And the little white clip right there, it's polyamide, it's nylon. There's a little clip included, which they didn't mention anywhere. And all this has to be rolled up with all the lighting appliances sold in 2024. So, and then if they have refrigerators, that's a different appliance section. They also get all the appliances, stoves, dishwashers, dryers they sell, all their plastics are rolled up together. Really exciting. For each plastic. So you're reporting the polyester, you're reporting the other polyester resins, you're reporting the other polyethylenes across polyethylene, you're reporting the PVC, etc. That's actually what you're reporting. The total, so you have to take all these different lamps and create models for them, multiply those models against their sales volumes, and then take all of that data and merge it together. And you're like, yeah, you really need to get going, especially if you're in the consumer electronics space. Like now, yes, the start of this year would have been better than now. Now it's a little bit late, but maybe still time. Okay, so this is a typical, overly simplified report. If you just had to report packaging, this is a company theoretically makes pasta and makes just pasta, which is an amazing single business model, but that seems to be simpler than everybody we work with. But so they have packaging. There is the pasta maker. So they'll bring in their own packaging. Okay. So the packaging they bring is unfilled, flexible. Flexible means when you put stuff in it, it changes shape, or when you take stuff out of it, it changes shape. So your poly bag, like that sort of weird crinkly plastic that the pasta is normally in. That when you open it, it tends to rip too far and fires macaroni all over the place. That thing. We'll say it's low density polyethylene. But it's when they bring it in without the pasta in it, it's unfilled. And obviously, when you put the pasta in it, the bag changes shape, so it's flexible. A rigid packaging could be the same material, but it's one like a pill bottle. When you take the pills in or out, it doesn't change the shape of the bottle, and that's rigid. So it's unfilled. They don't have pasta in it yet. Flexible. It's low density polyethylene. Probably is. By the way, one of the reasons they want to know low density polyethylene from high density polyethylene is theoretically because they're different recycling. High density polyethylene normally in your blue bin is supposed to be recycled. Low density polyethylene is not. Okay, here's a bit of truth for you. That's a total lie. The high density polyethylene is not recycled either. There is almost no way to do it. The only recycled really plastic are ones from industrial sources that have leftover no material. That stuff's recycled. The rest, not recycled. And one of the bigger lies is low density polyethylene isn't that different than high density polyethylene. It's not like it's this plastic versus that plastic. It's actually a continuum. It's how many low density polyethylene has only so many bonds saturated or closed. As you close and close more bonds, at a certain point, it's sort of semi-arbitrarily called high density polyethylene. They're actually basically the same material. And low density polyethylene, when it's exposed to air, it actually starts to close bonds and starts to become high density polyethylene. So it's not, and they're all mixed together, and there's no good sorting method. It's not like you can take magnets and separate high density and low density polyethylene. So as much as you may have felt bad about telling your kids there's Santa Claus, there's no real Santa Claus, you were filling the role of Santa Claus. Santa Claus is way more real than the recycling of your blue bin at the bottom of the driveway. Part of this whole thing is actually sort out the problem so they can figure out what they really need to work on. Because right now it's this pretend thing where you put stuff in a blue bin versus the garbage, and you think something different happens to it, and you feel better inside, but in reality, it's like the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. It isn't getting recycled. So they bring in the bags. A little diversion of mine. It's 5 tons of unfilled low density polyethylene. So imported, but then when they put it in the pasta in it, it's now filled flexible because there's macaroni or whichever in it. It's low density polyethylene still virgin. Now they use the specific component identification method, which is pretty easy with plastic. What is the plastic? Low density polyethylene. Okay, that's a lot harder to do with electronics. Like, what is every single plastic in that electronics? Have you seen the circuit board? The circuit board's got a zillion. So what we do is we've done an average bill of materials for so many circuit boards, and we use that model. The circuit board has tons of different plastics in it as the average model, the fixed factor average bill of materials model for each product. Sure, packaging, you can do every single material component if you want. Sometimes harder than you think. Electronics, no, you're not doing that. The quantity of plastic manufactured in Canada, since you've manufactured the pasta here, it's included. And then how much you've sold. In this case, it's selling, I've done 2 tons of the pasta packaging in Ontario, which is about 40%, and 20% in Alberta, 20% sales in Quebec, and 20% in BC. And we don't like the Maritimes, so we don't sell there. They don't eat pasta, they just eat fish, which is semi-true, the fish part. Yeah, the neat thing about being in the East Coast here, it is literally pretty normal to buy lobster out of the back of somebody's trunk of their car. But so this is where you report simple low density polyethylene packaging for the only thing you sell, which is pasta. Now you've sold pasta, you've sold a whole bunch of different products. You'd have to merge all their low density polyethylene packaging together. So it just doesn't really have the merge in here. So that's just packaging. But who only imports a single pasta? It seems a little or simple. Anyways, here's the electronics. Now let's try electronics. They're saying, hey, this guy manufactures stereos. Awesome. And the plastic in their stereos, so a stereo is electrical electronic equipment. That's the major category. Subcategory, electronic audiovisual consumer equipment or media. Okay, they're all merged together. Resin, the only resin in the stereo is high density polyethylene. Untrue, but let's go with it. There are so many different plastics in that thing at high volumes, high percentages. It's virgin, it's residential. They're using specific component identification method. Well, if you only call it one plastic, maybe, but realistically, your stereo is tons. You're doing average bill of materials or fixed factor, which I'll explain later. How much plastic in stereos do we make? So we manufacture stereos. How much plastic was involved in that manufacture in the product in 2024? So 1.5 tons. And then we sold the stereos. 800 kilograms of that plastic went to BC. So just over half our sales went to BC. Just under half our sales went to Alberta. Maybe they sell these stereos just for skiing. That would make sense. Except this is where it falls apart. I'll show that in a second. So, and it's got plastic packaging. Sweet. So the stereo is in it. So it's filled. It's a poly bag, flexible, low density polyethylene, poly bag. That makes sense. A lot more than just the high density polyethylene in the stereo. Specific component identification method. Sure, the poly bag, you can probably say that's poly bag. It's not a big deal. Low density polyethylene. We had 500 kilograms of packaging for 1,500 kilograms of stereo. How big is your packaging? Sorry, it's like 1/4 of the weight of the entire product is the poly bag. Seems suspicious. And then of that, 300 kilograms of the packaging went to Ontario, 200 kilograms went to Quebec. Just a minute here. How? I don't want to, throw a wrench in the lack of truthfulness or validity of this table, but how in the world did you sell 800 kilograms of stereos to BC, 700 kilograms of stereos to BC, but the packaging ended up in Ontario and Quebec? They're not that close. Just driving across Ontario takes more than 24 hours. They're not close together. I probably some quality checking would have been a good idea on this one, because I'm a little fuzzy how the stereos end up in BC and Alberta and their packaging ended up in Ontario and Quebec. The nice people in Quebec decide, oh, we'll unpackage it for you, then reship it to you in BC. And since when is the stereo only one plastic? Anyways, there's a few Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, make believe, stuff going on here. But the general idea is here. So they want to give you a general idea. General idea is not bad. The reality of this table isn't there, but the generality is pretty good. Again, this is more like this is not even a stereo. This is just a simple hanging lamp. That's the plastics in it. And you can say, hey, who cares about the 0.3 grams? Fair enough. But there's 6 plastics in there, over 10% of the weight of the product or of plastic. So not trivial. And this doesn't even have a circuit board in it. This doesn't have high complexity. So yeah. So this is slightly more realistic when they say, here's another guidance. So we make tools. So there's electrical tools, which are all your tools, your drills, your power saws are all electrical tools. All of their plastics are merged into one listing. Tools, residential. And then the first line is acrylonitrile butadiene styrene, ABS. It's virgin. Yeah, that makes sense. Not ever really. ABS almost always have some recycled material in it, but we'll say it's primarily virgin. And we manufactured 250 tons of these tools in Canada. That's optimistic. That'd be amazing. I think they're probably imported. And we sold about 230 tons, which is about 230,000 kilograms. Cool. And inside the same plastics, the next row, that's other thermoplastic resins. That's polycarbonate. So we had 98 tons of polycarbonate manufactured. The products manufactured put together had 98 tons of polycarbonate, and what we sold on the market had 90 tons. Maybe there's a bit of export there. Third row is so much PVC. It's related to power cord mostly, but internal wiring. And the fourth row is nylon, polyamide. There would be 6 or 7 others: polyesters, polybutyl terephthalates, a bunch of plastics in any kind of tool. And there'd be lots of others. ABS polycarbonate blends will be often the rule in power tools than the exception. There'll be PPO. There'll be a whole bunch of other plastics. But this is more, so again, this is a better way to look at it. They're reporting all their tools, potential, by plastic, the amount they say manufacture. Most suits can be imported and then sold by plastic. So a little complicated. Methods allowed. By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to put in the control panel. There's a lot to take in here. So I'm saying kind of want to get started or should have gotten started. Specific component identification method. Identify, this is where we do with a poly bag. You identify every single plastic in the product. Well, a poly bag is not so bad. It's low density polyethylene. Sweet. How about the twist tie? Damn it. Okay, it's going to be PVC. Don't worry. So on and so forth. Okay, so that's where you identify every specific, which you might do in packaging. This is really a simple packaging solution. So if you're just putting, poly bags, or you're just shipping apparel to consumers, the only consumer packaging plastic is the shipping bag. You can probably do specific materials. Average bill of materials method is you create an average bill of materials for all products that type. And that's usually where we start. That's the starting point through all complex electronics. You take a representative one, you make it this way. And so this is the starting point for all electronics. And we usually turn it into a fixed factor method. Now, there's some technicalities that calling it a fixed factor has to be approved by the government, but you can just call it average bill of materials. Same thing. So the idea is the same. You basically create a percentage of each plastic by weight of a product type. So basically, here's a refrigerator. We sell lots of refrigerators. We take one, we do real work on one. We say, hey, it's 10% nylon, 50% ABS, so on and so forth by weight. And then we just multiply against all the refrigerators we use by their weight and their sale. So use one model. And the way we actually do it in practice is, imagine you sell refrigerators. Funnily enough, when you sell refrigerators, by SKU, less than 10% of what you sell are refrigerators. So like, what else are they selling? Well, mostly if you sell a refrigerator, over its lifetime, you're going to sell at least 10 spare parts. And they have their own SKUs. So you need a way to handle all that. Now, spare parts are not finished electronics, so you don't have to report the electronics part of it, but you do have to report their packaging. So what we often do is, this is what we sold in Canada, and model 1 is refrigerators, model 2 is dishwashers, model 3 is laundry machines, model 4 is say blenders or whatever. And then for each thing you sell, and model 5, model X usually is accessory. And we check what each thing you sell and the accessories, where all we have to do is report with packaging. We create an average bill of materials for the packaging for any accessory. So basically, you just go, once you've created all the models, you basically average bill of materials, your fixed factor idea. It's a common method for electronics, the final number. Then you just click on each thing you sell in which model it uses, and then you have it multiply its volumes, and happy Excel super magic or Google Sheets for us merges it all together. There's a lot of work. That's why I'm like, some companies like, well, we just do like the sell a couple different plastics, packaging and stuff. It's still exciting to put together. Once you get to electronics, super exciting to put together. All doable, not the end of the world, but you really should have started in January. It's 7 months away, guys. And the fixed factor is also the most sustainable year over year. The idea is you create a percentage. So year 1, you make it good enough. In year 2, you improve on it. They don't expect perfection in first year, but they do expect improvement going to second year. So you improve on it a bit, do a bit of work, but the idea is then all of your amalgamation work you've already invented, you can just reuse, which is fantastic. So the idea is to make it, let's just update our models a little bit, add our sales data to it each year, and Bob's your uncle, and we're done. It's a lot easier. So, why don't we just get all the data from our suppliers? Complex new standard for data they do not have. Actually, basically every supplier does not have. Using a plastic coating they are not familiar with for deadline 7 months. And you need the data months in advance to combine with their sales data. Doesn't really work. That's why you want to go the fixed factor, average bill of materials method. You want to basically say, all I want to do is define the plastics in each of my product types, my refrigerator, my blender, toaster, just different ones, and define it there. It's so much easier. We've done so many projects now. It's so much easier. And by the time when you roll up all the final plastic numbers, you're going, I learned a lot about what's in my product. And there's no bloody way any official will be able to tell the fixed factor version apart from trying to do it on every single one. If you do one properly, it's amazing what's in there. The circuit board itself has such a range of plastics and has actually significant weight. It does add up. To recap, there's new guidance, that's why we're talking today, which we will send out with the slides. And the submission is due in 7 months. The average project, especially like complex project, is 6 to 8 months. So the clock is ticking. Like you really should have started the year. Now, people are going, oh, that's really cool. Don't worry, we'll ask for extensions like we did PFAS. This doesn't have extension. And this was just sent by the Canadian government to all Canadian companies at noon today. So we had a webinar this morning, and now this was sent to every company in Canada. It says, are you ready? You have to report. It's real. This is a real thing. This was sent today between the 2 webinars. It's mandatory. There's this little underlined bolded section that's got sent to every company in Canada today between my first and second webinar. It's real, really real. And it's not simple. I mean, sure, if the only plastic package you have is your poly bags over the stuff like the apparel you ship to customers. It's going to be more work than you think, by the way, but it's not the same as you make a laptop or a blender. Their complexity is much higher. So, summary, again, new guidance is available. Will be distributed with the slides. It's pretty good. It's 53 pages. There's some math in it. There's a few inconsistencies, like how did the stereos all end up in BC, and how did all of their packaging up in Ontario? And submission is due in 7 months. Okay, September is like almost 7 months today. So by the way, feel free to contact us. We really do actually have a very organized, we have like flow charts and across them. We go, okay, here we're starting. This is what we're doing. Here's what you have to do. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the two different ways to do it. You can choose product by product, whichever is easier to you. There's lots of good ways to do it. Okay, so about to do Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to submit it in the Q&A panel, and I'll try to get to as many as possible. Again, afterwards, next day or two, we should send out a mailer. It's got slides in it. It'll have the guidance. It should have a link to our YouTube video. You can watch it again, slow down, that I'm not talking like larger animals chasing me. And also YouTube is nice, could actually index a lot of it. It's like, I want to get through all the blather. Can we have the part where it says like funny bit? Because I want to go to like the 2 funny bits in the whole thing. That would be cool. And then just pretend and mark it down for my educational credit for work and move on. So out to us again, everybody registered will receive a copy of the slides, link to the recording, the guidance, and we'd be happy to help you. Okay, so great question. Are the de minimis exemptions applicable at the entity level, or has it rolled up under the company level? Hilariously enough, before I get into that question, de minimis for the Canada version is DE-minimis. I'm not sure if that's right. It actually took me 3 or 4 tries myself. It's a strange legislation. Okay, it is at the brand owner level, whatever that is. Unless the brand owner doesn't exist there, then it's at the importer, then it's the entity level. Clear as mud. So brand owner, it's the entire brand. Importer, it's what that entity imported. Now, you could, if you have multiple related entities, you can probably merge them together if your life's easier, which usually is. But for a brand owner, it's all of their brand. For an importer, it's what that importer, that entity imported. Clear as mud. What's the difference between institutional waste and packaging and residential? So I guess remember the 2 different systems. If it would end up in the blue bin at the bottom of a driveway at the end of life, residential. If it would end up in the big, huge blue bin like a back we have here at business, institution. Same thing with electronics. Would they be thrown away by the consumer, or would they be thrown away by a business? So we have that multimeter. We'll say they probably, whatever they sell to Home Depot, they might say, okay, that would be basically residential. Whatever we put in Uline or Granger, that's institutional. They might have a different weighted percentage, but something rough like that. So at the end of the day, it's these sales or this percentage of our sales, which is residential, not all. Our components sold to another customer would be integrated into their EEE in Canada's scope of reporting. Wouldn't the EE manufacturer be already reporting on the finished good, therefore the component manufacturer be exempted from duplicate reporting? That might be the reason why it's not included, but in pure reality, it's the same category as EU ROHS. EU ROHS components are not in scope, the finished products are. So it has to be for a finished product ready for the end user, for use by the end user, like EU ROHS. So components are not themselves in scope. You may be asked for some expansive data by your customers, which most of the time makes no sense. Usually, okay, the only sense it makes, they bought software and they're trying to justify it to the management. But your little diode isn't going to affect the reporting whatsoever of that product. You really want to take a circuit board, create an average model for that circuit board, just keep reusing it. Don't make their life difficult. Especially when different jurisdictions like Europe and here use decimal points or commas for like thousands or decimal places, it can get really exciting if somebody makes a mistake in decimals or commas. What about the plastic waste generated industrial sites? Okay, so what I didn't mention in 2026, there's one other institutional, the waste generated by the institution is also in scope. It's a different one. So imagine you have an office building here. Once you get to about 100 employees, they will generate enough waste to be over the 110 a year, and they'll have to report. Most manufacturing distribution facilities will also generate more than a ton of plastic waste, and they have to report as what did they dispose of as waste as a business, irrespective of the product. So their own waste generation. Their own waste generation. So we have a service for that too, waste generation. So a hospital, goodness help them. I was in one a couple weeks ago, nothing serious. But the amount of plastic in that place, the amount of plastic waste to have every year, that would be exciting project because like, the General Ottawa Hospital has to do it and Queen's University has to do it. And all of that have to determine 2026, the plastic waste generated by the facility. Those are going to be exciting. What about auto parts that goes on for vehicle repairs? Did you consider transportation? So if it's a component, it's not normally in scope, only the automobile. However, the packaging for the part would be. So it'd be mostly just reporting packaging. If a Canadian brand owner purchases single-use cups from another Canadian brand, who's responsible for reporting that? Fantastic question, actually. So 3 different groupings. Import, manufactured, placed in the market. So imagine it's either imported or manufactured, either made it in Canada or brought it in. Imagine it's not duplicated. So one entity imported it, the importing entity, or made it in Canada, has to report that activity. Then if they sold it to another Canadian actor, that's placed on the market. So they would also report that. So if they're the ones selling it, placing on the market originally, they would be reporting. Now, complicated question. Then what happens, if, like, imagine somebody makes, pick a big retailer, Walmart. Imagine somebody manufactures cups in Canada, sells them to Walmart. They are basically in Canada. They're still placed on the market, but then Walmart moves it to stores in every province. The original manufacturer has no idea where they went. Well, a couple things. Canada, you can delegate it. You can eventually agree that only one of you is reporting, but it should be the first one. But either one can. And if the first one doesn't know, like, who's selling the cups to Walmart, doesn't know what provinces Walmart ends up putting them on, you can use the average population per province and just say, hey, we put on 10 tons of plastic cups, which would be the mother load. And based on the different populations in each, the 40% of the sales in Ontario, 20% in Quebec, etc. So you can just make your life simple. When in doubt, there are lots of ways to simplify things. Whatever, like, oh my goodness, look at all, when you actually do it, you're gonna get, like, look at that IKEA single lamp. It is that complicated for single product. Create models. The first one is more difficult, and then just build off that. How does it work if you have some of both? Products are sold to business to consumers. It's 1,000 kilograms. Ooh, yes. It's year one, it has to be 1,000 kilograms of product in scope. So to make the de minimis, it's just, this year, it's just residential. And then you only have to report the percentage, even if it's just an estimated percentage, that ends up being residential. But the de minimis is residential only. It's a great question. The power cord is integrated into the design of most of our appliances, so it's not sold separately and cannot be removed from the appliance without cutting. Would this still fall under its own subcategory? No. So imagine your lamp has a cable attached to it. It's part of that lamp. Or the cable is in the box with the lamp. It's part of that lamp's reporting. Cables, like extension cables, they're sold on the market on their own. It's a very complicated gray area. Cables sold on their own with no intended product are technically in scope, but it's a very, very, very gray area. But if your product is sold the power cord is part of its declaration. The only exception, is computer straight up accessories. Like extra computer power supplies and mice and keyboards are actually one special category of their own. They're the only straight up accessory that can be reportable on its own, if not included with the product. But otherwise, any power cord, whether attached permanently or not, are part of that product's declaration. By the way, we also follow everything else from EURHS. If it's a large scale fixed installation, like this becomes part of an elevator. Elevators are fixed installations and nothing attached to elevators can scope of that. So, UF and PF resins are typically used to binder in plywood. Are these plywood and similar subject under the plastic registry? That is a very, very good question. So in construction materials, maybe. So in year one, no. Year two, when construction materials are in, a very good question. I hope for the phase 2 guidance, because these are basically, so when you get a circuit board, which is not plywood, circuit board is basically fiberglass with an epoxy holding together. Not that different than plywood. So chances are those resins, which are probably thermoset resins, will be reportable with construction materials in plywood in 2026. The same way the epoxy in a circuit board, which binds together all the fiberglass and copper, is reportable this year. So very likely those resins are reportable as construction material plastics in 2026. Does the 1,000 kilogram threshold apply separately to just residential waste? In 2025, yes. 2026, there'll be 1,000 for residential and 1,000 for institutional. What if we're just a user? We buy a product that may contain some plastics, but we do not know the exact composition with respect to plastics. We import a few items like gaskets, few cases, not mass importing. Well, if you're just a user and you're under 1 ton, you don't have to do anything. If you're a user and you import product and you don't have a distributor involved, yes, eventually you can get over 1 ton. Is enforcement on users that strong? Not really. Definitely not consumers. It has to be a business user. Consumers importing their own are not in scope. A business imports enough plastic for their own use. Yes, that importation counts because you'll end up disposing of it yourself. Does the new guidance only cover 2025 residential, or does it cover 2026 industrial requirements? It is only phase one. So it's not only just 2025, it's 2025 packaging, electronics, and the very specific list of single-use disposable. So it doesn't include any other things that are not phase one, not 2025 or more. Good question. Phase one will not apply to my organization. For phase two, in order to get started gathering this information, are the reporting requirements and info to be reported for institutional waste the same for consumer waste? Yes. It is literally, there's a little section that says waste stream. And instead of residential, it's ICI, industrial. I can't remember what the full word for ICI is, but it's industrial, something, and institutional, ICI. So it's just the exact same data. It's just that one section, which is a waste stream, changes from residential to industrial. What are the penalties for not reporting? It's a mandatory requirement to sell in Canada. They could fine the company. The Environment Canada, they have officers and badges. They can do whatever they want. They'll probably warn you off the bat and then do more draconian things. They do make examples of companies. They are nice about it. They usually give you a chance. And then if we've worked in a number of situations with enforcement, if the company is trying, they're often given a little more leeway, but they're not, Environment Canada, it's not their first rodeo. They know when you're trying for real and trying to pretend. Like most medical device companies are experts at trying for pretend. They're pretty good at sniffing that out now. Bruce, can you provide the link that the government provided today? Not able to find it. It's actually an email to the company. So probably go to the Canadian representative or somebody. Normally it has to be somebody who's in their database. So it's email. Not sure I can send that one around as easily. I'll see if I can figure it out. But it's actually an email. The government sent an email out to everybody on their distribution list. So every company they believe in can. How can the EPCS code be shared and managed within the supply chain as most suppliers do not have them? You could send it to them. A lot of times we're like, what do you make? Don't make your life too difficult. Let's set up a average bill of material model for the things you sell and just tinker with them each year and not have to go through this incredible exercise all the time. What we do is like, what do you sell? You sell sensors, you sell pumps, and you sell we'll say humidifiers. Let's create models for each of those. You sell two very different types of humidifiers. Okay, we'll make two different models and then just build off that. And then next year, instead of redoing this whole thing, let's go. Is there any improvements we could do in the model? Yeah, we just look at this piece and this piece. We could probably improve the model quite a bit, make that improvement, and then just use it again. Like, don't make your life too difficult. We are an American company that imports small amounts of industrial factory equipment, no consumer stuff. So again, you have to meet the threshold. You have to be the importer. You have to be the brand owner, and you have to be located in Canada. So if you look at Industry Canada, you have to have a location here. Otherwise, it's the importer that's responsible. So brand owner, if you're over 1 ton and it's industrial, and it would be in scope of EU ROHS, you have 2026 report. But everybody's individual situation, just reach out. We'll be happy to walk you through it. With regards to electronic equipment, does that include industrial electronic equipment like smart meters or other smart industrial products like motors and water pumps? Look at it the same way you do EU ROHS. Are they in scope of EU ROHS? Yes. Okay, next question, consumer or institutional. So the end of life, the interesting thing about a water meter, would the water meter on a private household be disposed of by the household or by the utilities company? Most time utilities companies, and therefore it's institutional, 2026. But you have to look at it whether you're in scope of EU ROHS or not. Usually if it's a finished product, you are. Some interesting exceptions for households, like the water meter is not owned by the consumer, it's owned by the utility, and the utility has the legal responsibility of moving it at the end of life. Then it's institutional waste because utility has to then put it in the blue bin. Again, what's the penalty for not having this information by September? Big words, mandatory. It's Environment Canada. They have the strongest enforcement. They have stronger enforcement than Health Canada has. They're the strongest enforcer here. So it's a really good idea to get it done. Do I need to report phase one of zero plastic imported to Canada? No, you don't. So interesting like this, unlike the PFAS, there's no requirement to report a negative. If they keep asking you, you might have to give them a statement like, why haven't you done it? Oh, it's because of this reason. So you might have to get, or I'm only institution. You might have to be able to prepare to give a statement, but there's no, like PFAS, which is declaration non-engagement, there's nothing like that for this. Residential only for September 2025. Yes, institutional is 2026, right. But we sell to companies and not directly do individual. It depends. It's not who you sell to, it's the end user. So again, the multimeter thing, they're only selling to Home Depot, which is a business, but Home Depot ends up being residential. So that's all residential. So it depends where the ultimate user is. Are all medical device packaging in scope of reporting for 2025 if it's plastic? And so it's an interesting question about biocontaminated. That one I'd have to look up. If it can't be disposed of in the regular waste stream because it's biocontaminated, I cannot remember. But other than that, for sure, the rest of the medical packaging is in scope. If it's going to be residential, if it's institutional, it's 2026. What are the implications again if an importer or manufacturer doesn't submit? So there's a fine. They can block your stuff at customs. This is Environment Canada. They have officers with badges. It's like the police. It's quite different than other departments. They're the ones who defend the lakes and rivers and stuff like that, and have to deal with logging and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, they're a lot more enforcement. They're the ones like if you like, oh, what happens if we actually our factory lets a whole bunch of poisons in the water stream? Environment Canada will get you. So it's the same thing. So be careful. Environment Canada is of all the departments, ministries in Canada we've dealt with. Environment Canada is the best at enforcement. Them and the tax guy, maybe even better than the tax guy. We are a fabric wholesaler that imports from several countries. Some of the fabric resins contain recycled polyester, either 100% recycled polyester or blend. Do you need to submit to the federal registry? Yes. So apparel is the only one that's different. Textiles, you have to be in the customs codes. If you're in one of those customs codes, apparel is the only one in the law that's by custom code. If you're in, then polyester does. Recycled plastic does. However, it's reported differently. Especially you have polyester virgin, you report that separately than polyester recycled. They're two different reporting categories. But yes, recycled plastic is in. For apparel or textiles, it has to be in specific customs code, which is pretty well all apparel. But the other textiles might have carpets and stuff. You have to double check the customs code. Is this every year reporting or one time? Every year. And each year there's more that happens. So especially by 2027, you're reporting more of what's happening to your waste. Is it recycled? You get a lot more questions by 2027. If I sell a cable to an AC unit manufacturer, is the cable in scope of reporting or just the AC unit? So if it's a cable with no intended end use, it's an interesting question. But if it's for the AC unit, it's part of the AC unit. But somebody has to report it. Is this link? So there's a Canadian Business Registry.ca search. That link to find the businesses? Yes. It's a Canadian Business Registry.ca/search. Yes, you can search any business there. You can search us. If you want to try it out, just put Claigan in, see what happens. Hopefully they fixed our address. They still have our address from 7 years ago. It's only 2 blocks away, but it's kind of frustrating. Does the institutional waste come in scope as of January 2026 for reporting or 2027? 2026. Institutional waste from stuff you sell is 2026. Institutional waste from what your facility generates is 2026 reporting for 2025 year. By the way, the 2026 reporting is for this current year, like what waste you're doing this year. So the facility reporting kind of want to get a handle of what you're doing because you're creating the waste right now. They have to report. Since phase 1 is only 7 months away, when does phase 2 kick in? Its reporting is exactly 1 year away. So of September. So it's the phase 1 is September 2025. Phase 2 with phase 1 again. Phase 1 and 2. One does it again, and phase 2 starts September 2026. So it's every September of every year the reporting. How do you calculate percentage of plastic in a polyester garment? Well, we actually have to do each plastic. We have a lot of tools here. If you happen to know what each material is, we can do a straight calculation. Otherwise, we have tools here that can tell us pretty quickly what each plastic is. There's also fun separating cellulose from plastic, which aren't necessarily the same thing. So it's usually the percent weight of polyester in the garment. When did the government host webinars on plastic reporting? Good question, actually. I don't know. I sometimes get mixed up which their webinars are PFAS. The problem with the government webinars right now, they can't say anything that isn't actually in their guidance. So we don't get anything new out of it. The only thing we get new is how many attendees show up. That's the only really interesting thing. It's exactly what's in the guidance. But I don't know if they have a webinar. It's a good question. Mostly I don't pay attention to the webinars because when I do, they're exactly the same in the guidance because they're not allowed to say anything that was not approved in the guidance. So they don't answer open questions. It's not helpful. Some of our appliances have multiple suppliers. For example, we sell window ACs. We'll use 3 different suppliers size unit. We still use the average bill of materials to report the different AC units, even though suppliers are different. If you think they're rudimentarily the same, absolutely. We use for fridges, we have 1-door fridge, 2-door fridge, a bunch of variations. We still say, hey, this is the model for a fridge, as long as like there's difference, like this is a steel fridge, this is a polycarbonate fridge. Okay, those are totally different material sets. But like for fridges, we get one model for fridges, and then we just by the weight. Even though it's not perfect, you're allowed to do that. So just different suppliers for the same type of product, not a big problem. If they're different weights, you just adjust the weight. Yeah, good question. It's deadline for submission phase 2, September 2026. And that's the big one. So you're only 19 months out. Maybe like complex electronic products, you want to get started soon. It's a lot. But perfect. Well, thanks so much for all the attendance. Again, everybody register, receive a copy of the slides, and we'll send out the guidance with this. There'll be hopefully a link to our YouTube version of this. And again, a pleasure hosting everyone. And I look forward to talking to everyone again pretty soon. And in the meantime, feel free to reach out. So by the way, this is the part of the webinar where I fiddle with the controls for a while and I try to figure out where all the controls are. And I try not to say swear words because that's happened. Fortunately, we have a really smart person here that can usually edit out my swear words, which is really nice. But cheers, and I see everybody again soon.